Have you seen what's going on the internet right now? It's insane. Okay, maybe it was always insane and we're just like catching up to it and starting to realize it. But I mean, the big news, obviously everyone's talking about it. Tucker Carlson gets fired by Fox News, but does this surprise us anymore? I have to admit I'm actually just a teensy bit nervous by it, because it's like, as long as Tucker was there, we had this one little toehold in the mainstream conversation where you're thinking, maybe one day they'll hear us, maybe one day they'll be listening to us. And I have to tell you, I'm a bit shook up, right? Because it's like, how much longer do we have to keep going until somebody hears us? I feel like it's like there's Horton with his little dandelion, and we're going, we're here. Anyway, I have it on, finger pinky cross my heart, and she'll show up. My pigeon will be here, but I have to go find her. So come with me tonight and we'll find the pigeon and we'll figure out what's going on with the internet, and who knows where we're going tonight. Welcome to the Mosaic Arc. Do you guys have any idea how hard this is going solo? Okay, maybe everybody else who streams on Unauthorized does, but I need my pigeon. I hope she shows up soon. Anyway, carrying on with our meditations from last week about the power of the microphone and the power of the amplification of the voice and so forth. It's still very interesting, of course, when we have, well, someone like Tucker Carlson, who you would think has enough market value, as they say in these situations, to resist being fired by his bosses at Fox. But of course he doesn't, which is a little sobering, because it means, like, if someone who commands the largest, mainstream audience out there on cable news moments and such isn't big enough to stand up against, let's be blunt, the advertisers, you do wonder what hope us little ones have. Now, I've also got some thoughts that I think are worth exploring tonight. Carrying on from Sorrow and his Mike, and in my Tolkien class, we're talking now about evil, right? And what evil is, and exactly how we can understand how people get caught up in it. And I think these two streams are crossing in a way, right? Because there's the media moment problem of our, let's say, why are they afraid? Why is, I'd say the advertisers, I think it's the advertisers, because as we've known, ever since there was advertising supported media, the advertisers were always the ones that got to say what came on the show, right? That's like, we've been worrying about making the soap companies happy since, the soap operas were running back in the who knows what 50s or 60s, and the washing powder was always the thing that was the big supporter of those shows. And you don't want to make the advertisers mad, because they're the ones making the content for everyone out there free, which is of course not really free because it's supported by people needing clean clothes. I don't know. It's supported by this well, what is it supported by if we're thinking about advertising? Maybe that's where I want to sail around. I'm just gonna sort of sail around and by myself here for a bit and think about it. Okay, so I have a little storybook that my mom gave me back ages and ages ago. She thought it was hilarious because I liked guinea pigs, and there was this guinea pig story in the collection. The book was called Pigs as Pigs, and one of the stories was about how this pair of guinea pigs shows up at the post office. This is like 1900 or so. And when the man comes to pick up his guinea pigs, the post office clerk says, you know, you owe some more money because these are livestock or something like that, and because they're pigs. And the man coming to pick up these guinea pigs says, no, they're not. They're guinea pigs. And he's like, no, pigs is pigs. And of course, you know, the hilarity ensues over the course of the story because the pigs keep making more pigs, and eventually, but the post office guy can't get rid of them, so he has, you know, crates and crates, and the pictures become very funny of how many guinea pigs he has. Well, anyway, my mom gave me this from, I think her parents had it. It's an older collection of stories, because I had guinea pigs all through college and into grad school. And in fact, you know, I brought my last guinea pig here with me to Chicago, came back over the seas. I spent a lot of money on those guinea pigs, just like in the post office. Well, anyway, I don't remember. I'd have to look down at my iPad and Google and figure out who the author of these stories was. But in the same collection, and mind you, this is like 1900. So somebody can look it up. Tucker is right too. The woke movement isn't driven by money; it's a spiritual issue. Well, we'll get there. Let me dither on about pigs as pigs first, and then you know, the audience will build up a head of steam and attention, and tell me how we are actually in a spiritual war, which we are. Tucker is totally right about that. But the problem is this sort of advertising funding of our entertainment goes back to the early 20th century. I mean, it's like last time I was in effect talking about the power of propaganda and the problem with radio and how the voice in the medium creates a particular surround sound reality. But in Pigs as Pigs, there's a story about a theater play, right? It's not a movie. It's not even a radio play. It's not on television. It's a play in a theater, right? Like with live actors and everything. And the joke in that one is that the advertisers want all their products placed in the play, right? This is like live on stage in the story. And the characters in the story, because they're, you know, having to promote whatever advertisements are supporting their theater production, have to consume the products. and I think some of them are like, I'm making this up because I can't quite remember, maybe soft drinks and stuff, that you know, they have to eat a lot of cereal because the cereal the cereal producers want their cereal made prominently. And so, you know, this whole play ends up turning into one long advertisement for the sponsors. So it's not a new problem. And that, you know, sort of, maybe this is it's sort of twinning. I have the title for this stream as being The Internet Eats Its Own, based off of a manuscript image that I have. I advertised tonight's stream with it, and I'm going to use it in the cover and such. Like, those of you who don't like listening to me ramble on and on and on while I'm waiting for my pigeon to show up with more stories can take the entire sense of this episode from this picture, which is the hellmouth, and there are like 3 of them. They're multiple hellmouths eating the 7-headed dragon of the apocalypse. It's from this Anglo-Norman 14th century commentary on the Revelation, which I just saw a facsimile advertised for. And it's like, maybe I was onto something better than I realized. The internet is eating all of those of us who participate in it, and we recognize this. I mean, insofar as we are, you know, sort of streaming into it and talking to you all and sending our energy through my Sauron ring of attention into the internet, we're feeling ourselves being captured spiritually. But the continuing capture is always this: if you want your audience boosted, you pay advertisers whom products you are also boost. It's like this sort of spiraling, not really mutual support community of but obviously if the medium is the message, and one of the things that McLuhan thought about a lot in his Mechanical Bride was the way in which all of these advertisements are themselves the main symbology that we are living with. And his meditations on advertisements for radios and stockings, and also the way in which these advertisements are often juxtaposed with the actual news items. And I mean, certainly I remember back when I actually read newspapers, you can have the horror of the week next to the clothing ad or something. And now, I mean, how if you haven't paid, subscriptions to the sites and you don't have your ad blockers on, the juxtapositions that we get in our online, reading are quite stark. So this feeling of being eaten by the advertisements, and Tucker having to answer to, I think it's got to be the advertisers in some way, because they're the source of the support for the media, right? So that's our theme for tonight. This internet eats its own. I have my team here to help carry on in this conversation. So Mel and Casey, welcome. Casey saying, yeah. So in thinking about, canceling Tucker, they aren't doing this for money. Well, I think they still are, but the sort of sense of what counts as money in what context, and who's getting money from where, and whose money, right? That they're certainly not necessarily doing it for, the happiness of the audience, or what we're going to get to is, Tucker's very powerful statement about what happens when you start telling the truth. Maybe we need to think about what money is. We haven't actually done any streams on that, and the problem of currency and current that we're participating in here, sending our thoughts into the currents of the interstreams that our arc is sailing along. We sort of exactly what is the energy driving all of this, and I'm not sure that money or currency is tricky. Casey saying they don't care that Tucker brought them viewers and revenue. There was mischief to be made. Well, but see, this is the problem. The revenue doesn't come from us watching necessarily. I mean, it's like, I guess, so, maybe we play off this. I have some books about advertising that I've been meaning to read. And I mean, one of the things, and now I can't remember whether I've rambled about this before, but of course, Dorothy Sayers, whom I do talk about regularly, I recognize, but one of my favorite of her novels is Murder Must Advertise. And I do feel like I've talked about this, but I'll remind you all, that what's interesting about it is in that story, Lord Peter has to go pretend to be a wage laborer. He has to go work, he sets himself up to work in the advertising agency, which is, of course, a humorous on Sayers' part, because she actually was a copywriter in an advertising agency for like a decade. And so, it's like, I like it because I recognize that I'm reading an account of someone's experience of what it was, probably obviously dressed up a bit and such, but, what it was actually like working in that kind of environment in the office, and the sort of banter that the copywriters have with the artists and so forth. Anyway, so Lord Peter is working in this advertising agency, and the main sort of one of the main accounts that the advertising agency has is, well, it's Nutrax for nerves, right? So it's a nerve tonic, which is basically drugs, right? So it's some kind of, we're never told what exactly it is. It's just, they make ads that, talk about how Nutrax gives you vitality and so forth, which who knows, Coca-Cola, right? It's some kind of stimulant. And then the problem of the mystery is that there's that advertising agency, the agency in the story, is somehow being used as the distribution hub for an actual cocaine trade. This is like set in the 20s. It's, she published it in 1933. So, the dope trade is also coterminous with the advertising world. And the solution to it, you guys, you can read it. I've reread it gazillion times, so even if I tell you what the solution is, I don't have to tell you who's doing it. But that they're using the ads that go in each week to trigger where the distribution of the packages of cocaine are going to go to, and it's marking it so that they show up in particular pubs based on when the phone book is and stuff like that. So there's layers and layers of advertising and drugs in this setup, and the sort of thoughtful puzzle that, or thoughtful twinning that Sayers is recognizing here, is the legitimate advertisements for new tracks are drug advertisements, and those advertisements are being used to trigger the distribution of the illegal drugs. So there's the legal drugs and the illegal drugs, and both of them are advertising through this same system, which suggests everything you need to know about how captured the media has been since there was media, since there was newspaper ads that you could pay for and take up a certain amount of space in the page, and then so there's I started on that because we're thinking about the revenue, the viewers and revenue. I mean, that you sell advertising in spaces like that, either in physical spaces on the pages or in temporal spaces like whatever ads go with Fox News. I never watched. I only ever watched the clips on YouTube. I guess I see those ads that YouTube puts on the front of videos now and such. So I suppose that carries the ads. But they sell those with the promise that lots of people will see this ad, and presumably that's therefore revenue for the company. And yet they don't seem to care that the people that actually bring in lots of eyeballs to see the ads potentially are going to not care anymore if Carlson goes and makes news reports somewhere else. I don't know enough about how all of the finance works. So Vox has talked a fair amount about how so many of these startups and so forth are propped up by investor money. They're gambling with the idea that if we put in enough money to this and launch it out and it gets big enough, then it becomes self-sustaining because there will be enough people watching that advertisers will want to pay us to send their advertisements out to our audiences and so forth. Now this is, it's like I've always thought about Sayers and that problem of how it's all a drug trade anyway, because the health pills and vitamins and cereal was of course also a kind of health food initially before it became completely sugar. But I haven't, the one of the things I have heard is that it's actually pretty hard to get people to buy stuff. The main thing that people do is follow the brand. So you have to create brand loyalty and then keep people buying off of that. And the thing about brand loyalty is, what we're seeing, for example, with Bud Light, if you lose it, then you've lost that segment. The products are all obviously very, very similar. Girardian twinning strikes again. So keeping your customers loyal to your brand of things is everything, right? And I think we do that in academia too. We have certain brands of institutions. I like pointing out the fact that, again, another early 20th century phenomena. So we have now, let's see, early 20th century phenomena, the effect of the mass media, the effect of advertising, the prominence of altering substance, mind and mood altering and health altering substances, and also this sort of brand construction that in American higher education, the main brand construction was the late 20th century was all medieval. It was medievalisms, right? All this collegiate Gothic branding of, here we have now what a school looks like. It's gonna look Gothic. It's gonna look Oxford-like, and you will want to come study here because of this aesthetic that we have created by way of our buildings. Now, I very much enjoy being in the buildings that I am in at the University of Chicago, but recognize that back in the 1900, when they start building most of the buildings, it's around 1900 or so, because a lot of them have foundation stones at 1920 or thereabouts. They consciously chose an aesthetic to brand us with as a school. So, I mean, it is modernity. We've now into currency, advertising, branding, drugs. I named the seven heads of the dragon, right? Casey's saying Tucker was right too. The woke movement isn't driven by money; it's a spiritual issue. Well, now to get to really the spiritual matter of what we're dealing with. One of the things we've been talking about a lot on the Mosaic Arc is how being in the internet is changing things, how we're able to do this in time, how it can be different effects of being in the light world, right? We're sailing in the light world here. We're looking into the light and we're sailing along the cables. I saw a map this morning. It's like we're trying to make some cables from Japan to Europe, I think, that bypass Russia. So, but these have to be laid in the Arctic and presumably therefore under the sea. So wherever you are, I'm traveling to you by way of buried light. Or maybe submerged light, as I'm sailing around on the internet, and the transmissions of this conversation are traveling underground and underwater. Thinking about what that means, right? And I had priming myself this morning. If you follow my Telegram, which you should, because I post there much more regularly than I post anywhere else, and so it's sort of like the running stream of my attention is in my Telegram channel. And I saw two things this morning that I thought were topical. One is Paul Kingsnorth's Substack. He has a multi-part meditation that he's working on about, you say, 4 questions concerning the internet. This was part 2. And he's thinking very much in these McLuhan level terms about the spiritual effects of being in the internet. I'm thinking primarily about the episode that he just posted this morning, where he starts off, it's the Neon God, and he starts off with a meditation on how he was at Mount Athos recently and was horrified when he saw one of the monks pull a cell phone out of his pocket, and was thinking, even here on the holy mountain of orthodoxy, the monks are tapped into this internet network through their as he calls them, black mirrors. And what is this going to do to us spiritually? Now, he's saying that at Mount Athos they mainly just had cars and cell phones and no women, but other places, and Kingsnorth talks specifically about these robo priests in Japan that are doing funerals, Buddhist funerals, and there's a monk. There's in Buddhist Japan, they don't just have smartphone monks; they have robot priests. Mindar, pictured below, and this is a robo priest which has been working at a temple in Kyoto for the last few years, reciting Buddhist sutras with which it has been programmed. The next step, says monk Tensho Goto, is an excitable champion of the digital dharma, is to fit it with an AI system so that it can have real conversations and offer spiritual advice. I mean, this is horrifying. That to think, but then it does. Well, Casey's saying, I hate the idea of a digital rosary. It gets worse. He says there's a Catholic church in Warsaw. It's Santo, SANTO, an AI robot which looks like a statue of a saint and is designed to help people pray by offering Bible quotes in response to questions. Not to be outdone, I'm still reading King's North here, a Protestant church in Germany has developed a robot called, I kid you not, Bless You Too. Bless You Too, which looks like a character designed by Aardman Animations. So, yeah, like that. Can forgive your sins in 5 different languages, which must be handy, he says, if they're too embarrassing to confess to a human. Now, this is terrifying. It's saying that not just the substitution of the human in these AI things. Now, part of me thought, and King's North is thinking about this too. It's like one version of things is, well, we're still, these are tools. We still make tools. We're simply working with our tools. And, if I, for example, instead of having the robot remind me of a spiritual verse, look one up. Well, we'll do Psalm 126. Unless the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Unless the Lord keep the city, he watcheth in vain that keepeth. It is vain for you to rise before light. Rise ye after you have sitten, you that eat the bread of sorrow. When he shall give sleep to his beloved, behold, the inheritance of the Lord are children, the reward, the fruit of the womb. As arrows in the hands of the mighty, so the children of them that have been shaken. Blessed is the man that hath filled the desire with them. He shall not be confounded when he shall speak to his enemies in the gate. Now, okay, so one of the gradual psalms, Nisi Dominus. I could not do that from memory because I don't have these memorized, which is probably bad. Books already, as famously Plato pointed out, diminish our cognitive training in certain respects and then amplify it greatly in others. If you have a full library of books, it's probably more than you could ever memorize. And so if you have them on your shelves behind, not behind me in my studio here, but if you have shelves and shelves and shelves of books and you can take one down and you can read it, is that significantly different than going to the robot and saying, give me a verse? Yeah, this is Futurama level stuff. Haha, forgive me, priest bot, for I have sinned. Well, indeed, right? And so this is, that King's North is actually quite terrified of all of this, saying, on and on it goes, and this is a problem. He says, part 1 of this essay offered up the suggestion that the global digital infrastructure we are building looks unnervingly like the body of some manifesting intelligence that we neither understand nor control. I suggested that if we view the digital revolution in spiritual rather than materialist terms, we'll have a better chance of seeing it for what it is. See the internet as the inevitable result of eating the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil rather than the fruit of the tree of life. See technological progress as a result of choosing information over communion. And the story that emerges is the Faust-like summoning of something we are not nearly big enough to be playing with. And he does, in that first episode of his meditation, get pretty scary. I mean, it's like the people working in this tech who are starting to get nervous. I mean, I instantly, when I heard John Cormack speaking at BaseCon last summer, and he's saying, oh no, they're just like, little toddler slaves. And I'm like, wait a minute. He didn't use the word slaves, but he kept saying they're AI is, has the intelligence of a toddler. And I'm like, well, that's, my dog does too. And that, at what point are you going to get worried about the way the tech is responding to you? Hello. Look at this. She's here. Shall I bring her on? Are you ready to come on? Okay. Well, you're not in yet. I'm just talking to you, and they're assuming that I'm not talking to some AI bot that I'm inventing. Okay, you're coming in. Are you ready? Okay. There you go. Welcome. Look at that. You made it. Okay, so I'm terrifying them all with stories of the spiritual battle that we're in by way of the internet. You ready?
Oh God, yeah. Let's scary ghost stories of the internet.
We're here. Look how
I'm
much
ready.
better it is when I've got my Pigeon. Oh my gosh, I do not like talking to myself in the audio realm. So I've been thinking about the problem of advertising and Tucker Carlson getting canceled, which is
Yes.
probably because of the advertising. Because why is that would be the reason, because that's the way media has been funded, as I pointed out, since like the beginning, right? Since there was media and advertisements, at least since the beginning of the 20th century.
Yes.
So I think there's probably a spiritual problem in that. But now I'd gotten us to the point where I was diving into, because Carlson says, and I haven't read this out yet, but it's actually significant to this problem, that what's going on, we're definitely in a spiritual something, right? And he said quite explicitly that this the problem of good and evil, and why don't we pray? And that's been one of the reasons that people say he was canceled, right? So that's where I was aiming. But by way of this Paul Kingsnorth meditation on the terror of the internet as a spiritual situation, and particularly whether or not the it's like, are we imagining the AI that's coming out being, obviously, I mean, he sometimes says it overtly demonic, right? That we're sort of making portals to demons, or I mean, there is a place where it's simply, he says, we've done all of this before. It can be the internet is not alive. The internet is simply us, potentially, right? What we are dealing with here is a computing problem which needs to be sensibly managed. We just need some smart rules, perhaps the equivalent of a non-proliferation treaty and some globally agreed test bans. Blah. We've done it before and we can do it again. Okay, and then this is, if this is true, then the digital hive mind we have already built is simply a hugely complex, globalized neural net made of collective human experience, built upon a digital infrastructure created by the U.S. military. I mean, that should terrify us just to start with, but keep going. Which is already being used to spy on the world's population, harvest its data, manipulate its preferences from politics to shopping, control its movements, alter the material substrate of the human brain, and build up an unprecedentedly powerful alliance of states, media organizations, tech companies, and global NGOs with an agenda to promote. It is also the basis of a newly emergent technology, AI, which will, at minimum, be responsible for mass unemployment, fakery on an unprecedented scale, and the breakdown of shared notions of reality. I submit that this option is only slightly more reassuring. I haven't really watched Kingsnorth. I mainly read him, but
we're doomed.
We're doomed, right? This sort of and that's a pretty funny and terrifying, prospect. And I was reading that this morning, and then thinking what Carlson has like dropped himself into by way of, as we are doing in our little way here with our tiny audience, participating in this and knowing therefore that the internet is definitely paying attention, but then it's paying attention to everything we do. From it's like if we're worried about advertisers, it's like every time we click on anything, how many ads do you get? Well, it depends on which social media platforms you're on, right? But the number of the ads I get through Facebook when all I did was search for shoes, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I get a lot of really odd requests from goth pages on various social media platforms. The algorithms, they know what I like. So you can't hide. I mean, just being outside of the analog now means that we're in it. There's no, like, we're completely connected to it through commercial exchange. There's no way of regulating it anymore. Your banking behaviors are tracked. The way that you're using your cards when you're out, unless you're using cash, everything is tracked. I mean, I don't really think privacy exists anymore to a degree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we're doing is we've consciously decided to participate in it without the illusion of privacy, and you've had a very public interaction with the digital world for a long time. But you know, the decision to dox yourself and to release the illusion of anonymity, you know, the last little illusion of anonymity that you have on the internet. I mean, I was quite nervous to do it in the beginning, and then I thought, well, really, it is just the illusion of anonymity, because I'm already out participating in everything anyway. So, yeah, it's just varying degrees of attention that makes the difference. So we have a smaller audience, and then other people have a larger audience.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting because the reason Carlson is now in trouble, as it were, although he seems to be quite cheerful and, you know, was tooling around his little golf cart and stuff with his wife. I mean, but even that, it's like he has, you know, zero privacy in that sense. It's like as soon as he's outside, the people are all watching him in his you know, relative to royalty, not much celebrity, but relative to the rest of us, quite a lot of celebrity. Now I forgot what I was thinking.
People are living in public now. Everybody's living in public. Before it was royalty, it was celebrity, you know, public people of note. But really, because of the technology that we're using, we're all fundamentally living the lives of celebrities in the sense that we're all living in public to one degree or another.
Well, and this, okay, so this, I was thinking with Carlson, what happened to him is, you know, he got too big, as it were. I mean, it's like there's what I was talking about last week with the Sauron's mic and the worry about the radio and such like that, that there's this weird kind of, yeah, it's like what you're saying, everybody's a celebrity now. I mean, the Andy Warhol, you know, 15 minutes of fame. It's like whatever kind of fame we get, everybody wants it. You want that video to go viral, and suddenly all of the world's attention is on you for that brief amount of time. But on the other hand, there's this, you know, constant, oh, well, you know, Carlson is dangerous. AOC is saying that, right? Carlson is dangerous because he has such a big audience. And I mean, what I was thinking about that with the microphone question of, I mean, people simply being terrified of the fact of there being these giant audiences. And then sort of what do you do with that when you're speaking? How many people are listening to you? What is it that we're afraid is happening when so many people are paying attention?
That's a really good question, because these audiences aren't physical audiences anymore. It's not being on stage in an auditorium with a physical audience that you're present with and can measure. I mean, it's a very strange feeling. I mean, at the moment, we have a very small audience, which is great. But regardless of how many people are watching the Mosaic Arc, we could have 100 people, or we could have 100,000. You and I are still just talking into the camera. We're not standing with the crowd anymore. It's almost it's transformed the experience of this mob attention from being physical and present and so kind of predictable to phantasmagoric. And it's like having a ghost mob that's out there somewhere that you can't really see and you can't measure. Because it's immeasurable, I think it's terrifying.
Well, what's funny is I was actually thinking of it the other direction, but you're right. And so there is our problem of, I've actually got a single person trying to phone me right now who should know that I'm on live right now. That you know, there's the effect of being the one being paid attention to, and that I've you know, once or twice been in a situation where I was actually in a television studio, and all you have is the camera that you look at, and I guess, you know, a variety of tech people that are watching you and such. I was never in a situation where there was more than 2 tech guys, right? So that's it, right? Yeah. You got a small room of people, and you're talking to a dot, and that is allegedly going out to, you know, millions. It's like, at what point do you have any sort of understanding of what that means. Because if you're not in a stadium, there's not a physical presence of them. But what I was actually thinking was the other, that people are afraid of the audience that is somehow watching in this remote capacity, and that, so that those who are now, celebrating the fact that Carlson's off Fox, at least, are saying that's great because he was dangerous because there were so many people listening to them. But as you're saying, it's correct. It's like we have no sense of what that even means. I mean, whether you have 10 people in your audience or 10,000 or a million or 10 million. I mean, the absolute biggest audiences in the world are nowhere in the West. I mean, this I realized once so I had a brief moment watching some Bollywood movies, and you're looking up the stars in those productions, and they're like dwarfing Tom Cruise numbers of fans and followers. It's like if you watch sheer numbers of people. One of my colleagues in my own department at Chicago writes in Chinese history, modern Chinese history, and he says, when they translate his books into Chinese, he sells more copies than you can even dream of pretending to sell as an absolute bestseller in an English-speaking audience. It's ironic because we're not even aware of the sheer numbers in other networks of audiences. And so within this tiny little English speaking world, we've suddenly lost someone who had 1 million, 3 million a night. Oh, right. And that's like it's a lot, absolutely, but it's nothing in terms of, well, is it, right? How many people, I guess maybe this is the next sort of level, how many people does it take to sway a conversation? And it's actually very few. They're right. It's very few to change a lot of people's minds. But on the other hand, and I was thinking about this earlier before you jumped on, my sort of the other. Okay, so I've got 18 thoughts about Carlson, but one of them was I suddenly felt very, very sad. It's like, how hard is it to change people's minds? To get them to, I mean, from my own perspective, it's like, I keep getting in trouble because I go look, right? It's quite literally my job, checks jobs description, to question the narrative. I'm trained, professionally trained, even more than Tucker Carlson, right? In what in the fancy world we call historiography, in the ordinary world we call questioning the narrative, right? And all from historiography, it's the accumulated questioning of the narrative that has gone on in a particular field about a particular narrative, right? So I'm literally required by my own profession to question the narrative. And when I do it, I get told that either I'm not doing my job, I'm abusing my platform, I'm, how dare you have tenure, what are you doing questioning the narrative? I'm like, that's my job. Okay, so that's one part of it. And then I go and I look, and then I think, wow, not the narrative I've heard. If I speak this out loud, I'll be fired. It's like, how hard is this? Why is it so hard to question? It's like, I mean, it's one, why is it so hard to question the narrative? Carlson was doing it with a degree of courage, because questioning one version of one narrative, you lose your job. And yet a lot of people, he's considered frightening because a lot of people actually were encouraged by the questions that he was asking.
I'm having a swig of water and I'm going to think about it. It links back to the fan fiction, the rolling wheels of fan fiction conversation that we had with the laying out a historical narrative. And market pressure, which, I mean, there was obviously the advertiser risk for Fox. They're worried they're going to lose numbers because their advertisers aren't happy about what Tucker was talking about. But there's a huge contradiction at the moment with, I think, having these enshrined cultural positions, for example, in academia, where you are working as a scholar, working on studying history, studying the creation of history, because history is the creation of narratives by various people as it's happening, doing all of this. I think a lot of people are still operating in a framework which assumes everything is individuals, instead of realizing that what we're actually doing is confusing individuals influencing a narrative and corporations influencing a narrative. Because the market pressures that are happening now are not market pressures from individuals that are trading one-on-one with each other. We're dealing with corporatized markets that are, incredibly powerful. The advertising world is all about creating desire and shaping that into profit. And in order to create a desire, they have to create a narrative. So we're kind of battling industrial desire factory with, this need to have institutions which can guarantee that we are, in fact, able to know what is truth and what is really happening in current events and history. People are not comfortable discussing the difference between those two things and how one is influencing the other, and how this industrialized avarice, this advertisers' need to create desire is overriding our other need as cultures and as people to be able to hear facts, to be able to keep track with reality. So, you're getting in trouble for things, which is very funny. You're getting in trouble for doing your job only because other people's jobs is to manipulate narratives and to make sure that people are desiring products that are, it's in their best interests to keep this going. So they don't care. They don't care if everyone is actually doing what they're trained to do and paid to do.
This is good. So it's what Carlson's gotten in trouble for too, because I mean, he's at least, everybody has multiple layers of story, and one of them is his CIA connections in his background, right? I think his dad had some connections there. So, there's no simple side here, but since I've been paying attention to him, and I did read his little book, The Ship of Fools, which is our ship metaphor, right? I've liked what he's been saying, and liked that he's actually challenged some of the things that, yes, the advertisers don't want people questioning or saying. But he's pointed out in the last few days, or in maybe at that heritage talk, that his job is to ask questions too, right? That's supposedly what journalism was supposed to be doing, is going and considering what is the truth. And I think what you've done just now, and it's helped me, because I was sort of rambling on about advertising. It's like, no, you're right. We've got conflicting narratives, and one is, I mean, I don't know if advertising is fundamentally lying, because you're not supposed to lie about the thing that you're selling. But you are I mean, it's like, that's very smart of you. That's what I talked about Dorothy Sayers too, that she has some wonderful passages in Murder Must Advertise, how the advertising copyists create these. First, they create these characters that don't really ever exist. The busy housewife and the dutiful father and
Yes.
the, charging businessman. It's like they work in these kind of archetype characters that then,
Yes.
marketing always is wanting you to project yourself into one of those archetype characters, which is why marketing ends up so worried about, representing the full population, because they want to get every kind of character that people might
Yes.
possibly put themselves into. And then Sayers goes on, it's like the advertisers ask you these intimate questions that, your best friends wouldn't ask you, like, are you worried about body odor? Or like the kind of
Yes.
ads you see with news reports now on the internet, it's always like your feet fungus, right? And they're as gross as they possibly can be to get you to, either run away or click. I'm not sure which, right? So they're stock characters with intimate questions, and then crafted into these. They're not even fairy tales, because they're not parables. They're not trying to teach you anything. They're, as you were saying, trying to capture your desire to be part of that little vignette of a story.
Yes.
I think we've cracked it. Wow, that's pretty good. Because of course
it's always,
history doesn't want to be this, right? It does it needs to be actual individuals making real decisions under, complicated circumstances, and there's not simple, this side and that side choices. Typically there's multiplicity of none of that, right? We need stock characters, embarrassingly intimate questions, and straightforward arcs of, you have a problem, we now solve it.
yeah, it's interesting the way that they're leading with those kinds of questions too. Do you need more fiber in your diet? It's like, oh, I didn't think I did until you asked me this. Why? What's going to happen to me if I
Right.
if I don't have it? But this is market pressure. It's market pressure which is done through behaviorist techniques, psychological kind of behaviorism. Edward Bernays wrote a book about it called Propaganda, where he said, I forget what date it was like back in the 20s or something, and he basically said that the market is driven by people which are able to manipulate people's desires, that people actually don't know what they want, they're told what they want. The mimetic rivalry is activated in the market so that people begin to think, oh, I need this because everybody has it, or I desire this. Well, really, do you? Or is it that you're being told that everybody around you desires this thing, and therefore you have to engage in the mimetic rivalry? And so with individuals, this is less complicated. But when you have corporations, massive leviathans of the trade world, which are activating the mimetic desire in the marketplace to try and get everybody to buy products and to monopolize certain markets, it's not in their best interests to have everybody wanting truth over mimetic desire. They want, this it's a kind of psychopathy, but companies don't run with the spiritual techniques to overcome human envy and covetousness. They rely on it. So because they're soulless, they're companies, they're corporations, they're corpses, they can engage in this without remorse, because a dead thing can't have remorse for dangling envy in front of the market to try to monopolize it. There's a massive conflict between what corporate giants want and what human beings need in order to function coherently and sanely through historical crisis. I think this is why Tucker's in trouble, and I think it's why you keep getting in trouble, especially because you're trying to do what you do. The narrative that people are building now is no longer anchored in their actual experience, because they're losing track of what is happening to them and what they want to happen to them versus what they're being told is the acceptable choice, the mimetic choice, what the group is going for. So we're fighting advertising. We're fighting these, we're fighting a kind of meme war of advertising versus non-corporate humanity. It's a very interesting moment in history.
So what Kingsnorth actually gets to in this, what are we doing fighting the internet, is ascesis, asceticism of different sorts. And he has one. Well, he's doing the raw and the cooked from anthropological differentiation between the civilized and the primitive or the barbaric, and saying, one way is to think about, how do you exist within it. Digital minimalism. And I think I'll tell you what the other one is, and then we can talk about these. But he has, he's not really that. You sort of get to live in it without being of it, which is fine, but it's not very developed. But then he has the raw ascetic who, I guess, simply steps outside of it and no longer participates in it. What I think, I haven't read him enough in depth to know exactly where he's coming from in all of this, but for my own study of monasticism and asceticism, I'm already worried. I mean, he starts by saying he was at Mount Athos and horrified that the monks were pulling out their iPhones and having their black mirrors already there. That the recognition in the monastic tradition is, to a certain extent, as long as we're alive, we're in it. The problem with temptation, the problem that the spiritual struggle is going to be lifelong, and you're always training. That it's not something you can fix. I just thought of this, right? The chat room discussions that we see often going on about, like whether you're baptized or whether you're, confirmed, or whether you're, Protestant or whether you're Orthodox, or, it's like, are you fixed and therefore you're set, right? And of course, from the monastic perspective, you're never set. You're always in training, and you have your life for this ascetic discipline to train yourself in. Having said that, there is a monastic idea. It's like you retreat from the world and live in the cloister, but even then you're still in the training. You can get out of the sort of city world and into the cloister world, but you're still amidst other human beings. You can do it by yourself as a hermit, but you'd think get demons. So there's kind of like, no matter what, our life is a training. Our life is a kind of military experience, as it says in Job. So, raw or cooked as an ascetic, you're just alive. You're in the now, and the degree to which we can have an asceticism of the internet or not. I mean, I think that there is a worry there. Is it possible to live in this world, to be online in this conversation? I mean, Kingsnorth acknowledges that he's typing to write this, to publish it on Substack so people can read it and on their devices. It's not like he's out of the internet. But then it's, as you and I have talked, it's like, it's not that since there was cities, since there was writing, people have ever been out of the technological environment. And whether even as human beings that is sensible. I mean, we're not animals, we're human beings. So we make cities, we make tools, we make in this conversation, and then we go back over into but this internet tool, I mean, because of the marketing things, I mean, it's, as we're talking now, realizing most of what we're afraid of is being cut off because some advertiser gets mad at us. It's like,
yes,
and the advertisers are running the governments too, effectively. I'm not sure what a corporation is.
Uh,
I mean, we're talking about as a dead thing, and I think it is. It's sort of it's vampiric, right? It exists beyond human
yes,
lifetimes. Um,
yes.
but which then makes, in fact, the corporations the problem, not the internet. And the corporations are a medieval invention. They sort of, created these business entities back in the Middle Ages. Maybe they are vampires. They're medieval.
They're that old. They won't die.
Some of them are.
Oh, yeah, they are. Mm. Um, I mean, this is a really interesting problem, because we have the internet, which really is a very, very complicated postal route. I mean, it could be looked at like that. What we're sending is really complicated, like data, but essentially it is letters. It's just got sound and visuals with it as well. So we're basically in multi-sensorial postal route altogether, with people sending various things across this, the roads of the internet with all the traffic that goes on. And it is appropriately called traffic, internet traffic, which is a commercial term. How we can deal with it, I'm just thinking of a few things. People are scared to be attacked by the advertisers. They're scared of the public relations power of the advertisers, the facelessness of the advertisers, the fact that they are corporations and you're not battling individuals, you're battling these undead entities which have particular legal properties that flesh and blood human beings don't have. But it's not so terrifying if I think about it in the sense of how the church operates in an environment which is now dominated by advertising. Because it's very similar to what was going on with the Roman Empire. I remember you posted that thing, and it was the Mediterranean and all of the shipping traffic that was going on during the Roman Empire, and how when the empire collapsed, the shipping collapsed also. Right. So suddenly there was this enormous dive in traffic and an enormous dive in technological capacity. I think we're at the stage now where the ships, the traffic, with digital traffic, the advertisers are pushing people to this crisis point where everybody has to decide the limits of what they're going to allow advertisers to demand in terms of manipulating the it's a difficult thing to put into words. Manipulating the mimetic desire versus deciding that we're going to follow our traditional cultures and our religions in spite of the advertising and the advertisers pushing us away from that. This is the challenge that we have now, because everybody is talking about communism and socialism and, oh, it's terrible. The conversation in Australia has been, oh, well, you all wanted socialism, you got it. We're not living in socialism. We're living in a cultural environment where private companies, corporations have linked up with various government departments, and we have public-private partnerships, and the corporations are deciding cultural taboos, dogma, social attitudes, and pushing everybody to think that there is a social consensus which doesn't exist. One example would be on the drag queen story hour that everyone has been adopting now after it's been in America for a long time. The majority of the population here are not in agreement with this. It's a minority thing, a radical minority that want to have these events running. The majority of the population don't want them at all. But it's being proposed through corporate advertising that this is now normative when it's not. I'm sorry, I'm coughing. People are going to have to come to the point where they are recognizing that our cultural narrative is separate to the market narrative. I think this is why the Tucker thing is interesting. He's talking about spirituality, and
Yes.
that's what's annoying everybody.
But this is a spiritual problem, because it's, as we're talking now, I'm thinking, okay, so I had two Substacks that I was looking at this morning that started me thinking on this theme tonight. I mean, they're both, touching on the internet, but this one is the Midwestern Doctor Substack, and I've been following him because he mainly talks about the medical situation, and he's done some excellent reporting over the last year or so about all of that. But today he came up with Big Pharma's destruction of American journalism, what the recent changes at Fox News say about the country, and so he's meditating specifically on what Carlson said, and then Robert Kennedy Jr.'s response about it, saying, he told the truth about how greedy pharma advertisers controlled TV news content, and he lambasted obsequious newscasters for promoting jabs they knew to be lethal and worthless. And so Kennedy is drawing direct attention to the advertising problem, and at this point gets to what Tucker said in his speech about the truth telling. Which is worth reading. Shall I read it now? Okay. So this is actually first he the Midwestern Doctor quotes RFK Jr., who's talking about how people don't trust the media now, and this is why this is a problem. And this is Kennedy. That when the media and the corporate captive media and corporate captive government sees other sources of truth, they have to brand those misinformation because they threaten their paradigm. They threaten their orthodoxy. And of course, there's a lot of genuine misinformation. It's an interesting question. So it's like, is there misinformation when you're just trying to get people to buy something that they don't want? It's just misinformation. You don't need that. But as we know, a lot of the misinformation is just statements from that depart from government orthodoxy. But I think as we're unpacking this, it's like there's advertising orthodoxy, and the government is so caught up in the advertising orthodoxy that I'm not sure even what content there is. I mean, the medical stuff is particular. It's like in the soft drinks and the this and that. One of the things that's been lingering in my head as we're talking is it takes a lot of advertising to make people buy anything. It's very interesting. It's like you have to saturate because most advertising works best when it's small target audiences that want that thing, right? And then they're choosing between different fencing foils, right? But only fencers are going to want those. So there's no point in advertising those more generally. Whereas what you advertise for the population at large is drinks and cars. And not even clothes or anything, right? Maybe, sports clothes, but you have to get a real sort of lowest common denominator to get out at the level of most people even seeing the advertising. So I think there's a problem in that level too, right? Okay, but as we know, blah, blah. So they have to either censor us or they have to lie about what's true and what's not true, and that amplifies the polarization. It amplifies the hatred, the fear, the insecurity, because you're being lied to and you're being silenced. Censorship doesn't work from any point of view, though, and it's very, very dangerous. So that's Kennedy's version on things. And of course, he's been very concerned about the medical situation and the vaccines. But that's within this advertising context of wanting people to continue to take these substances. So your main argument is you need this, right? What you were saying is like, what I don't remember what your example was, but do you have bad breath? Like, do I? And you're suddenly worried about something you didn't even know was something to worry about. Do you have feet fungus, right? Okay, so let's now consider what Tucker said at his recent speech. And this is the truth-telling one. It's like if you just start telling the truth, and we usually have it at this giant abstract level, although Tucker was talking about how, I used to think that we were in this, parliamentary style democracy where you debate the spending of the tax money, right? You have different proposals and you debate about that, and that's what government's about. And of course, that's not what it feels like it's about now. It's something different. And so telling the truth, as he says, turns into this thing that I would say two things that I think we're thinking about. The first is you look around and you see so many people break under the strain, under the downward pressure of whatever this is that we're going through. And you look with disdain and sadness as you see people become quislings. You see them revealed as cowards, and you see them going along with a new thing, which is clearly a poisonous thing, a silly thing, saying things they don't believe because they want to keep their jobs. If there's a single person in this room who hasn't seen through that George Floyd and COVID and the Ukraine war, raise your hand. He's at the Heritage Foundation in this one. Oh, nobody? Right. You all know what I'm talking about. The herd instinct is a very strong impulse. And you're so disappointed in people, you are, and you realize that the herd instinct is maybe the strongest instinct. I mean, it may be stronger than the hunger and sex instincts, actually. The instinct which is inherent to be like everybody else and not to be cast out of the group, not to be shunned. That's a very strong impulse in all of us from birth, and it takes over, unfortunately, in moments like this. And it's harnessed, in fact, by bad people in moments like this to produce uniformity. And you see people going along with this and you lose respect for them. And that certainly happened to me at scale over the past 3 years. I'm not mad at people. I'm just sad. I'm disappointed. How could you go along with this? You know it's not true, but you're saying it anyway. And then we had the picture of the one guy not giving the Roman salute in the crowd. That is, it's like the herd instinct, you were talking about the mimetic rivalry and the twinning and the mimesis, right? The imitation. It feels terrifying, as we've talked about, and not to be cast out of the group, not to be shunned, but it's often over very simple and silly things, like to get a certain haircut. To wear a certain kind of shoes under certain social circumstances, to, have a car that doesn't stand out in the traffic, something, all of these things. We the reason the mass marketing works is because we do blend for the most part. Yes. We tend to homogenize over time very quickly. Right. Which ironically, it's like saying this I was thinking when we were talking earlier about the fear that people have of, you could get a big audience and they'd all go with you. And it's like, I mean, curiously, on the one hand, it's really easy to do. And on the other hand, it's really, really difficult to get that many people to pay attention to you. I apologize. I got something stuck in my throat. You need more water and less dust. Sounds like you're in I've got it. I was driving in the middle of nowhere. I've got another bottle. There you go. So this is probably the thing, the thing you're experiencing too with the, you've got this platform and there's no recognition of the work that went into getting you where you are. But it's an interesting thing that the platform itself, whoever holds the mic, whoever's got whoever's got the ring, whoever's got the microphone,
there's an assumption that anybody that's going to get it is going to use it in order to stir this mimetic rivalry and then build up a homogeneity of behavior and opinion and try to encourage an acceleration of it. This is, I think, why your profession is so profoundly important, and also why Tucker Carlson's profession is so profoundly important. And people like, yay, artists are profoundly important, because we need people who are able to wield attention and to not want to monopolize the attention in order to accelerate homogeneity of thought, which is very, very rare. At the same time, people that are willing to have a microphone in front of them and risk the rage of the mob while they're holding it, which is a rare trait also. The mass of people in any given situation are not going to hold the microphone and say something directly into it that is going to pivot the aggression of that mass of people. You know, most people are not going to go on stage and deliberately infuriate the audience. They want to be loved by the audience.
Right.
They want to be, they want to be adored by it. So this is the danger. But we're losing a sense of particular professions and responsibilities of those professions and what they're actually supposed to be doing for everybody, which is to break the homogeneity, to prevent people from completely losing an ability to resist the mass formation, you know?
Well, okay, so it's interesting you're saying that, and just as you're thinking about it, it's like, why is it a bad thing to it's I think, in fact, in most situations, those of us who are Cassandras or, you know, artists, or, you know, the odd ones that are not mostly wanting to be part of the herd. I mean, it does seem like throughout history we have evidence of people being that. But on the other hand, for the most part, human society depends on the herd, depends on there being
Yes.
a group. And the sort of concept of worrying about the mass in these terms only comes into being with the media that makes it possible. Right? It's only in the 19th century that you start having people worrying about it in precisely these terms. It's obviously with the media that create a sensation of there being such a thing as the mass. And that's why with like Mill, we have, you know, John Stuart Mill and the death of Millian liberalism. But the thing that Mill was actually worried about in on liberty was the individual being overwhelmed by the mass. That there wasn't that, you know, and he was also quite scathing about saying the mass population is simply defined by its own mediocre guys writing in newspapers. So in Mill's terms, you know, the newspaper journalism created the mediocrity of the mass opinion. And it needed the liberal eccentrics to be able to stand up against all of them. So, I mean, it's interesting. He also projects that there is the individual used to exist in the Middle Ages, and you could have true heroism and, you know, accomplishment and things like that in the Middle Ages, but not now, not in the mass society. So that goes back to, it's like, to what degree is what we're experiencing a creature of our media environment, which people are worried about, whether or not it's demonic or whether it's simply, you know, too many minds connecting together through all of these roots? Or is it something, you know, sort of the human problem of being able to stand out against all the rest of the other human beings and saying, let's go this way instead of that way?
Yeah. Yeah. Being the only one that doesn't want to follow the Pied Piper.
Well, we have a lot of stories about it being bad, but on the other hand, people working in concert together build cathedrals too. It's like we have a vision together. Let's build this beautiful building. We have a vision together. Let's I always say this. It's like when people bang on about how cities are horrible. I'm like, yeah, and they're also our greatest accomplishments as human beings, because we can live in them somehow. The people can actually, well, cities also eat children, as it were. It's like they tend to be less fertile than the countryside, and so people send the younger people come to be, in the Middle Ages they often shut up in the towns to be servants. Yeah, right. So I'm not sure the mass as such is bad, is the problem. It's just those of us who want to say something that the mass doesn't like, and we don't even know why the mass doesn't like it. And that's the fear, right? That's the fear that AOC has of Tucker Carlson, that he might say something that creates this new mass that she wants to have. She wants the mass to be in agreement with her, and she's worried that he'll make a mass that's in agreement with him.
Yeah, it's a I've been watching this documentary, so it's popping in my head. So I think I need to mention it. But I've been watching a little documentary about the court of Versailles just before the French Revolution, and what was going on with Marie Antoinette and her husband Louis, and how her behavior was spun. So she was subject to this public relations disaster.
A big one.
A big one, probably one of the biggest. But not being conscious of how to wield the opinion of the mass, and not being conscious of how she needed to present herself as a monarch,
right,
and manage this part of her responsibility. And her mother is writing her all of these letters from Austria saying, you foolish idiot, I'm getting all of these reports back that you're just spending all your money on shoes and hair and jewelry, and you have no concept of what anyone's saying about you at all. So it keeps getting worse. And you kind of have to feel sorry for her at one stage. So being born into the position where she has to push against the media machine as it existed at the time. All of a sudden, people in France and around Europe start creating these engraving propaganda pictures that they're circulating all over the place. And it's pornographic. They're depicting her, bare-chested and in all of these different compromising positions with different people. So trying to promote this idea that she's a sexual libertine and she's up to a lot of things that she's not necessarily doing. Because she doesn't answer it, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. So there's this corrosive reputational destruction, because as the monarch, her morality and her virtue is the morality and virtue of France. So eventually the French just see her as completely out of control and wretched. And then, of course, what happens. I think it's this fear that once enough reputational damage is done, once everybody's been defamed to a degree, once the mass has its opinion formed of somebody, it can never be undone. And everybody's terrified of it. Because it's it's the character assassination problem.
I think this is definitely, no, I'm glad you brought this up, because I was also thinking about this when you were watching the actual documentary. I was watching Bridgerton and that's contemporary, because it's, well, a little later, but Queen Charlotte in England, and this sense of I mean, literally they're doing nothing. Well, I mean, I guess the men are there to be at Parliament in the tone, but for the rest of it, it's the women wanting to get married and make good matches for their daughters and things like that, and that one mistaken conversation could ruin your reputation and you'd never recover. I mean, I think Bridgerton does play that fairly nicely, and realizing that this internet world feels like that very much, right? This tiny little court where, I mean, Tucker is trying to talk about things that are actually like real issues, but the video that he just put out this evening is saying nobody's talking about real issues, right? It's all questions that nobody actually is going to care about in 5 years. It's mostly this kind of social negotiation for who's been seen with who, and who therefore is part of the tone and who isn't part of the tone, and has literally zero to do with any decisions that are being made, because all the decisions are being made at a bureaucratic level that is impervious to any of the actual discussion.
Yeah, it is like court. It's like being at court and having a permanently damaged reputation. People use this as the cliche, that word, character assassination. But in the internet world, it really is an assassination. You're out. The internet is forever. So it's court, and it's this really odd reconstruction of the Hindu caste system at the same time, something that I've noticed a long time ago. You're born into the caste system in India. You can't change your caste. The assumption is that the caste that you're in is a deserved status. So because you've got the reincarnation, you've done something, you're born into this particular caste. At no point during your lifetime are you able to buy your way into a higher caste or buy your way out of the caste that you're in. You can't earn it through valor. You can't ascend in any way. You can, however, go down. You can go down. The internet is creating this really strange digital Brahmanism, and mixed in with the court dynamics of reputational assassination and making sure that everybody is keeping up appearances and seeming to maintain the appropriate etiquette that we're supposed to, while ignoring actual problems altogether. And everybody who won't play along with it gets put into an untouchable caste. And everyone's terrified of going into the untouchable caste. Nobody wants to be there. So they continue to do it. It's our culture is now being dictated by a desire to avoid being put into an untouchable caste. But this is a completely different kind of class system than existed before. Because your class can change very rapidly in this environment. It's not guaranteed.
Well, in that
before
sense,
you're a landowner,
it's like the court. It's like the court. So it's like your status can change because the queen looked at you funny, and if she decides she doesn't like you, nobody does. Right? It has zero to do with any other features that you have or care. It's literally just whether or not the queen of the court decided that you were her diamond in the Bridgerton setup, which I found very it's like when the queen declares someone as her diamond for the year, and therefore she's going to be the one courted. It's like, no, she's going to be one hated by everybody. Don't you get this? Right? Yeah, but it's
nobody likes the favorite.
It's not even. I mean, it's the true social death, right? It's like, what would you do? You only exist to be in that tone. Therefore, it's not like you can go do anything else, because your only existence is in that conversation. And that obviously is, I definitely see that. We see that on all of the little subsets of the internet population, that so and so's talking to so and so was seen with so and so showed up on other so and so's live stream and therefore cannot be seen with this one. It has nothing to do with the content of what people are saying, except for, you can test whether or not you belong to the tone by whether you're willing to talk certain topics in a particular way. But that's all. Those change all the time because they have no solidity. They're just social markers, which we have obviously lots of time talking about. But the feeling of the dynamic, it makes a lot of sense if it's just if it's a court culture, which we could say that is a human, that has been the feature of human history all along. It's like there's an inner group of very, very wealthy, connected people that then worry about each other and everybody else starves.
Yeah. So that is what happens. But we're in post-Christian culture now. So at the same time, everybody's expected to behave as though they're Christians, as though they have some kind of Christian morality. And this is very challenging because I had a conversation with a woman recently about this actually. Yeah, and you've probably heard this too. When people claim that they have, I'm not a believer, but I have the same values. So it's the reduction of faith to values, which are, it's not the same thing. It's like reducing the religion to branding. It's like saying, we have the same shoes.
Right, but it's it's social agreement. I have the same values. I agree with you socially.
Yes.
Right. Whereas
for now,
faith is that problem, that thing that you could do and you can disagree with everybody.
Yeah. Well, we've got the crisis happening now because if you say, no, we've got the same values, the values actually are that most people are constructing right at this moment in the internet Armageddon that we're all living through, are mostly influenced by advertisers and by mimetic pressure of marketplaces and corporations. A corporation is bequeathing most of the values now that people are agreeing to play along with, even if they actually don't agree with them whatsoever, in private find them quite distasteful or immoral, out of fear of the attention of the mass being turned towards them. That terrifying the revolt of the audience and the faceless mass. But everybody's relying on post-Christian values. No one's actually relying on faith. So there's no baseline whatsoever. People are not sharing any consensus on reality. So even if we're playing court politics, we're doing it in a very strange way. I'm kind of rambling around, but it's court politics in post-Christian Western culture, which has the residue of Christian charity without the reality of it, and then values which are residually Christian and more influenced by corporate advertisers. It's very dangerous.
Well, I think the residually Christian means that there's a sort of performative social expectation of certain kinds of gestures, but it's unanchored from actual. And faith. We're going to have to talk about faith properly at some point. But in this context, saying it's sort of basically the thing that enables you to stand against the herd when it's all going that way, which is ironic because people, in vilifying faith, tend to describe it as that thing that makes you go along with the herd. It's like, in fact, Christ's teaching means you are often having to not be there with the herd and saying, no. So I think advertising works to create a social desire that you look like everybody else, because that's the point, right? You want to sell a lot of these things so that everybody is the same because the more of those you
Yes.
can get, and that feeds on the, I mean, herd instinct, but it feeds on the desire for social inclusion. And we'd say without Christ's teaching about how you stand up against that kind of social inclusion, the group has no, what you're describing, the group has no resistance.
The, hmm Yeah, there's no true north.
Right.
They don't have the lodestar to reorientate in chaos of competing social pressures.
Right.
So,
which the advertising
have,
exists both to, I mean, you get brand loyalty, so people consistently buy your product at a base level, but then it, quote, competition, which the market always wants to get rid of, is designed to have to trigger competitive desires in order to get people interested in having the things. And what's funny about it is, like, a lot of the stuff, most of the stuff that we buy, I mean, most of the stuff okay, I'm already unusual in one way because I buy a lot of books, right? But most of the stuff we buy isn't necessarily things we've seen advertised. It's a small subset of the stuff that people attach to our luxury performance objects. I mean, most of the things we're buying, I don't know. I don't think advertising has as much effect as the advertisers wish it could, but it's enough to create a culture of that kind of diversion of attention. And then that's what everybody's always saying. Maybe that's just the advertisers are so anxious about the diversion of attention, it feeds into everybody else's concerns. And so everybody constantly is worried about not being paid attention to. And it's not even real. I don't know. I think the feeling of the court paying attention to you is very, very powerful. And it's hard to resist.
There's the two, but yeah, we've got, well, it's two problems: wanting the court to pay attention to you, and also avoiding the rage of an angry mob. So there's two sides to the anxiety, and maybe that a lot of people don't understand the consequences of abandoning truth-telling for this court conformity, mimetic conformity, because it's not always going to be a dangerous thing to conform with everybody else and to not say anything.
Right. Most of the time it's being polite and not interrupting whatever's going on. It's just being well behaved.
Yeah. And then there are instances where breaking that tranquility, that social tranquility, is necessary to prevent something truly horrible from happening.
Right.
But it's possible that a lot of people have not had moments where they're faced with this kind of choice. And if they have, whether or not they feel satisfied that they made the right decision. If they've made the wrong decision, there's a lot of shame associated with it also. So finding out someone you knew made a choice to maintain the social facade and sacrifice truth to maintain their own reputation is one thing. Having an entire auditorium of people find out that somebody's done this is a different experience altogether.
Right.
And on the technology that we're using now on the internet, I mean, everything gets leaked: screenshots, emails, phone calls, recordings, photographs, videos, everything. a lack of heroism, a lack of ability to be able to say, no, I'm going to potentially trash my own reputation in order to defend the truth, can come out later. There's a lot of people are delaying a lot of things all the time, as we've seen on Telegram. They're delaying cutting off associations with particular people that they should cut off with, just to maintain reputation, to maintain status, to maintain influence, which is power. Public perception. Everyone's managing their own personal branding in this internet world of public relations on the internet. So it's sort of speeding up the mechanism because it's so fast. And then we all get the we all get the experience eventually. Will I tell the truth, or will I allow the reputational pressure to dictate what I'm doing right now?
Right.
It's similar to this movie. I don't know if you've ever seen this movie. It's called The Box. It was based on a Twilight Zone episode, and it's a fantastic film. I would recommend watching it. It's really good. It's very creepy. So the premise of the movie is that there's a couple, and I think he's working for NASA too. So there's some things in there, but they're having some financial trouble, and the couple is happily married, but they're a little bit stressed and everything. Anyway, so they get this strange arrival at the doorstep one day. It's a guy with the deformed face who comes to the door, and he has this box and goes inside and says to the couple, I have a proposition for you. And they say, well, okay, what is it? And he says, I'm going to give you a box. There's a button in it. If you push the button, you'll get $1 million. And someone you don't know will die. They're horrified. And they're saying, this is a horrible troll. And he said, oh, no, I can guarantee that it's not a game. It's real. So if you want that $1 million, all you do is have to push the button, and then someone you don't know will die. So they go through this whole thing.
Right.
That box moment is the internet. Who pushed the button? All of us at one stage have pushed it. Someone may not have died, but we've all made the decision at one point in our lives to get personal benefit at someone's detriment by not telling the truth in a particular situation. How many people have consistently refused the button? How many people have consistently refused to push the button? So those moments, I think, are the ones that everyone's terrified of having revealed. This is why, like, AOC doesn't want Tucker Carlson to have his own group,
Right.
because then everyone digs around, and after a while you find out, oh, that was the moment that you pushed the button. Let's see what you did. Let's see what you overlooked in order to maintain your facade, your social facade, and your reputation. Let's see what you overlooked in order to maintain your status in this strange digital court that we're all living in. And it's very terrifying. It's very terrifying because it's so quick. And for all of us, I think we're living in this knowledge that it's so quick and it can happen at any moment.
Well, it's immediately happening to Carlson because of the Dominion suit. So they're going through all of the discovery. They get to go through all of his texts and things like that, and find out that he said things about, Trump and stuff like that. And yes, so the scandal level of revelation is obviously terrifying to everyone, because even to the level of, I was a bit silly maybe very silly in this conversation. And if it's projected up in this serious situation, nobody ever laughs, right? Because the joke is never part of the courtroom or the boardroom meeting or something like that. And you can say, that was a joke. Why are you so mad at me? And that stripping of context.
Yes. Yeah, humor. It's a humorless analysis.
Yes.
And so all the pathos is taken away, the feeling, the emotion, the tone, the humor, the intention, everything is read in a completely black and white way. And then that changes the interpretation, changes the perception, changes the way people are seeing you. So yeah, it's again taking away that human element from whatever has been going on and pushing it into a kind of vacuum where emotion doesn't exist, and where things are read in an administrative and bureaucratic way. You know, human interaction becoming corporatized, and so things that we're doing, things that we're saying, things that are being translated from what I would call human into like a corporate bureaucratic kind of language and a mode of behavior. And we get judged by that standard instead of judged by the human standard.
Well, in the McLuhan media terms, like the digital is that. Literally digital, 0 1 0 1 0 1. So there's
so how do you train to exist in ones and zeros, where everything is going to be judged in this corporate bureaucratic mode, divorced from the incarnate human life? Yeah, and that's probably part of the panic. The panic that Tucker Carlson said we need to be human and we need to tell the truth. But that's clashing with the technology. It's clashing with people's real experience of what the technology is doing to them. Everyone's had a fight on Facebook at one stage that made everybody angry and caused family rift.
Right. Although I don't know. I mean, I think Facebook died, right, in that sense. That I remember when, we were first on it, 2008 or so, and you ended up in these, somebody's wrong on the internet, and you have to answer and sort of carry on. And I do wonder. I mean, Kingsnorth saying we need the asceticism of it. Eventually, maybe we're getting better at it. I do feel like even 5 years ago, we were still in Trump, and there was sort of a boisterousness to everything. It doesn't feel like there's that anymore. It does feel like the fun is gone, which could be good. It means it's like, well, but go back out into the world and drive around in golf carts instead of being on television. It could mean that we're learning better how to discipline ourselves in this environment, which is a kind of is a civilizational thing. It's like you learn how to live in the city. You can't live in the city in quite the same way you live in the country, and so you adapt to the mores of the internet. It will be sad if what turns out that the internet is actually a very boring place, and who wants to be here?
Yes. I think that's what's happening, though. I think that's what's happening. It just it's becoming one giant mega bureaucracy. And I mean, the issue is people are not going to be able to leave it because we need the technology now. The effect of existing in a mega bureaucracy online transforms the culture into a mega bureaucratic culture. There's a weird feedback loop there.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't know if asceticism is necessarily the solution. Just to not engage with it and not use it. It just doesn't seem practical.
Well, he had two options: the cooked, which the civilized, and the raw. And that's, I don't know Levi Strauss. It's from Levi Strauss's Raw and the Cooked, and I'm not sure what the metaphor means.
Okay.
But he was saying, like there may be different modes of asceticism in this. And there's certainly, within the Christian tradition, there are different modes of asceticism, whether you're Benedictine and living in the cloister out of the world, or Franciscan or Dominican and living as a mendicant but within the city. And that was one of the Franciscans and the Dominicans were one of the epiphenomenon of the cities in the High Middle Ages. That the monasteries don't seem to answer the spiritual questions that the cities were creating when the Franciscans and the Dominicans come out. So, it's like we could, what kind of spiritual discipline will enable us to live in this new city format, as the Franciscans and the Dominicans enabled Europeans to live through the urbanization of Europe. Right. So we have a hopeful way of thinking about all this, that we're going to, in our Draco Alchemicus, figure out a way to solve it. We promise we're gonna. Yeah. We're it's like we may be sailing around in the Mosaic Ark, kind of lost right now, but we have a plan, which is put it in poetry and tell a story and figure out the myth that way, which we haven't figured out yet. We're just, we know that's the direction the plot has to go, because that is the question. How do we live in this new environment? Well, so I found the other passage I read, I thought is this one, and then I realized there were two different passages of Carlson that were actually helpful. So the one is the herd instinct one, which was helpful, but then the other one is what he said about telling the truth. And everybody likes this passage. This is Midwestern Doctor citing it again, but Carlson recognizing that truth-telling also has a positive feedback loop. And once you say one true thing and stick with it, all kinds of other true things occur to you. The truth is contagious, which could be why the liars are so worried, right? It's like the more you tell the truth, the more it spreads too. Lying is, but the truth is as well. And the second you decide to tell the truth about something, you're filled with this. I don't want to get supernatural on you, but you're filled with this power from somewhere else. This is where he got spiritual, right? Saying truth telling, right? Try it. Tell the truth about something. You feel it every day. The more you tell the truth, the stronger you become. That's completely real. It's measurable in the way you feel. And of course, the opposite is also true. The more you lie, the weaker and more terrified you become. We all know that feeling. You lie about something and all of a sudden you're a prisoner of that lie. You're diminished by it. You're weak and afraid. Drug and alcohol use is the same way. It makes you weak and afraid. But you look around and you see these people, and some of them really have paid a heavy price for telling the truth. They're cast out of their groups, whatever those groups are, but they do it anyway. And I look at those people with the deepest possible admiration. I'm paid to do that. I face no penalty. Well, someone came up to me and said, "You're so brave." Really? I'm a talk show host. It's like I give them any opinion I want. That's my job. That's why they pay me. Not anymore. But this is hilarious. I mean, he did this on Friday, right? And he was like, not anymore. But okay, it's not brave to tell the truth on a cable news show. I think we can acknowledge, maybe, Mr. Carlson, it is.
Now it is.
And if you're not doing that, you're really an idiot. You're really craven. You're lying on television. Why would you do that? You're literally making a living to say what you think, and you can't even do that. Please. Okay. Hey, we have a super chat. Thorn. The Arctic cables was great gravy. I never thought about that regarding the current bank war. Oh, well, good. I'm glad we're bringing news too in the midst of the mythological meditations. I mean, I think I am admiring. It's funny. Was he Carlson or Tucker Carlson? Anyway, I'm admiring Mr. Carlson for the cheer with which he's been facing the past 3 days, 2 days. And hope that we can continue to be cheerful in our truth telling. But he is right. I mean, it's interesting if people worry about telling the truth, and what you were just describing a bit ago, saying, now I forgot exactly. You get worried about saying anything because the group won't go along with it. But on the other hand, it is true. Maybe not the first time, maybe not the second time, but you do get stronger the more times you don't let the fear of the group prevent you from telling the truth, because you're telling the truth. And then people do start listening a little bit more, and I do think he's right. It eventually becomes contagious. My opening sort of frustration was, it's like, but there is also a lag, right? It's not like you just tell the truth and suddenly everybody, whoops, I've blown my tech here. It's not like you tell the truth and suddenly everybody agrees with you. It's not that contagious. It has a more slow burn. over the time. But the more lies you tell, the more you're having to worry about that button pushing that you were saying, you know, that somebody's going to push the button and it's all going to be exposed, and then you lose everything. That kind of thing doesn't seem to happen if you tell the truth.
No. Yeah, I think once it's happening, you know, in my experience of this too, is initially you get pushback, and then after the first blow of enormous pressure from, you know, having said what you've said or done what you've done in order to counter a false narrative, afterwards things are actually not as bad as you were expecting they were going to be. The response is immediate, but it doesn't linger for as long as people think it does. Because you're setting your own mechanism in motion then. You know, the truth is its own mechanism that starts to work to correct the things that are hidden or ignored, or, you know, which is what you were saying, it's kind of a slow burn. Eventually the truth as a mechanism influences people because it starts to undo falsehoods and things that are based on falsehoods. Right. So, you know, like opening Pandora's box, you open all these horrible things up. In this case, you're not necessarily opening a box and releasing plagues on people. It's the opposite. It's like releasing a salve for things which are festering, and you know, a lot of social pathologies and things that people are ignoring and medicating with the various products that they're buying in order to ignore everything. So
yes, that's a good medicinal image to go to. We will be healed by the brazen serpent. That's what we're looking on the dragon.
The snakes stop biting after a while.
Yeah.
But it's painful in the beginning. And I think a lot of it is managing. You know, I've had a very good conversation with somebody recently, and, you know, managing our own ego and ability to abandon a need for our own public relations management, you know, because we all want to be seen in the best light possible. That's just human. No one volunteers to be seen in the worst light possible. Abandoning that need to manage your own social image in order for the truth mechanism to work is the main battle, because it doesn't work if we're either serving our own reputations or we're serving the truth. So,
that's beautifully put. And of course, we do have one who has done that voluntarily. Which is why we call him Lord. That the taking on all of the shame and the suffering is what Jesus did. And that's it's like the truth that he carries is what you've just described. We're able to stand up against, and they'd say, like, advertising is all public relations. We're trying to stand up against the great public relations machine that tells us if you allow yourself to be shamed and despised, it's all over.
Yes, which interestingly, you wonder, is that yet another advertising campaign? Is it real?
Well, Dorothy Sayers did call her novel "Murder Must Advertise" because life affirms itself. How's that for an end? Okay.
Nice.
I'm glad you found your way back, my dear. I see you're in a new location. This is your new streaming location that we will see you in next time. Yes, you're not going to run away from me again, right? We've recovered the pigeon.
No.
We've recovered her from her journeyings around. I hear you went to the ocean. Did you go to the seaside?
I
Look
did.
out over the waters.
I ran away to the sea. I was staying in a little gypsy caravan, which was really lovely, and then driving through national parks and things. So I got lost on the way home.
That's her excuse.
Finally made my way back.
She went out to contemplate the beauty of creation. Ha, ha.
Yes. The offline world. The offline world. If there is such a thing anymore. Yeah. We're merging.
We will find out in our quest to be continued, yes? So yes. Casey concludes with, maybe the snakes don't stop biting, we just become immune to the venom. Well, to be continued. Thanks for joining us.